So, Jeremy, the Supreme Court has obviously ruled that race-conscious admissions are verboten, can't be used. How are business schools responding?
Well, this was a much anticipated decision, and I think one of the important things to keep in mind is that a lot of the business schools maybe were responding to this even ahead of it. They wanted to make sure that they protected the diversity of their class. They were anticipating that a conservative court would strike down affirmative action. So, at a practical level, what this means is they can no longer ask about race. They can no longer use the checkbox of how you identify yourself in their admissions process. But virtually every school, or almost every of the top schools, is increasingly asking you for qualitative discussion of how your unique background can enable you to contribute to the class, which gives any individual who's had whatever life experience it might be. Maybe you've immigrated to this country. You're a first-generation college student. Maybe you have been economically disadvantaged. Maybe you do identify in certain previous checkbox categories. You're able to still use those statements to express your diversity, so that they can qualitatively come to understand that. And I think that was something that was, again, very much anticipated in this process. So I think on a micro level, I think the schools from an application perspective have already responded. But I do think that this is a story that's going to play out, not now, but over many, many years, and will probably be litigated for many, many years, and will probably be something that, from a policy perspective, will constantly be evolving and changing.
Now, I know when California banned affirmative action, the UC system saw minority enrollment decline by half. So it can have some impact. But I hear what you're saying, because it's easy in a holistic admissions process to not only count on a GPA or a standardized test score, and to look at these other factors. Because if you are a first-gen college student, there's probably a high likelihood that you faced hurdles or disadvantages, whether you're white, black, green, or orange, and that says something about who you are.
Yeah, I think that the schools have been working extremely hard to attract diverse applicants for many years.
Yeah.
My father was an MBA. I actually went to his reunion with him, and he graduated in the class of 1971 from the University of Western Ontario. There was one woman in his class.
Wow.
One woman.
Wow.
And so, the school, we've come a long way, and I don't think the schools are eager to give back those gains, not for any reason of political correctness, but I think because it does make the class and the experience more interesting, and your organizations are better when you have a diversity of ideas and opinions present, and that has to be created by the business schools. So I think that the schools might have to invest more in ensuring that they're out there, that the word is out, that they're at events where they can ensure that their message is out, that they're seeking a diverse class. I think also I would suspect that this is maybe a little conjecture, but I would suspect that I think some of the schools are going to give up on testing. Basically, if the Supreme Court is saying that you can't consider some of these qualitative judgments, then you have to be accepting the person scientifically with the highest test score. As part of your process, you can't deny a person who's qualified on the basis of their test score for someone who's theoretically, has a lower test score and is according to the court less qualified. That's a different discussion.
Right.
And so I think some of the schools are going to say, well, we have to give up on the testing so that we don't have that data and we can make more qualitatively based decisions. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the GMAT and the GRE, and I think, again, some schools are already responding to that. You look at Darden, which has opened up a world of test flexible options, and Michigan has followed suit, and there have to be other schools that are going to follow in order to protect diversity, because a lot of the tests, they're designed for not a lot of economic diversity, because they reward those who can invest the most in preparing for the test.
True. Which is why at one point Harvard Business School even decided not to accept GMAT scores at one point.
Yeah, years ago. I would welcome it back. I think I'm not so sure that it contributes that much. After a certain threshold, I think you have to understand that you're students are going to be able to perform in the program, although I think you can get that from lots of other data points. But the whole regime, obviously, of high test scores is not one that is really about the student. It's about the institution, and it's about institutional prestige relating to U.S. News and World Report rankings. And
True.
I would hope that schools would have more courage. These schools that are allegedly teaching leadership and trying to create the next generation of leaders out there in our business world are, I'm going to say this, I think are suffering from cowardice when it comes to standing up to a test regime because they're afraid of their ranking changing. That's so silly.
That's true.
No business ethics teacher is going to tell you that works.
What about the impact on the applicant? You mentioned before you think that business schools may have to spend more to reach minority candidates. Are you seeing already minority candidates in the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision saying, okay, I'm disadvantaged now, I don't have a shot?
I don't think we've seen that at this point.
Yeah.
But I think what we've actually seen is some confusion and trepidation about disclosing through those essays, which are designed to get you to disclose. They're saying, some people said to me, if I'm not allowed to talk about my race, according to the Supreme Court, if I inform them, am I going to end up out of the pool? Like if I use the intentional workaround,
right,
am I going to be held out of the pool? And I think we've had to certainly say to people that's not the issue. This is designed, maybe with a nod and a wink, maybe not, maybe quite explicitly, to ensure that you have that opportunity. My hope is, and this is very idealistic, but my hope is that over time, it's not going to happen soon, and I don't think there's going to be a positive impact in the short term, but over time, maybe this actually helps to change some of the context of the discussion around diversity in the MBA classroom and attracts a lot more economic diversity in the classroom, because maybe the test regime will fall and maybe there'll be a new conception of diversity that is kind of about lifting all boats, that the schools go out there and speak to. I think there are all sorts of studies out there that say that a lot of very, very qualified people, I think this is what you were getting at before, very qualified applicants don't apply to top schools because it's sort of not within their worldview or within their comprehension about test scores to even apply. People were discouraged by sky-high test scores. And you saw that during COVID, where schools waived the tests and suddenly they were pleasantly surprised by the surge in volume. and
Big surge.
Yeah, huge surge in volume, and had to have accepted some applicants they hadn't accepted before. And I'm curious, maybe as that data they can study that data, whether maybe some of them will realize that the test scores don't matter. I talked to one admissions officer off the record, I can't say who she is, who said to me that it wasn't that the admissions office would like to drop the GMAT, but in discussing it with all stakeholders, alumni want them to keep it because alumni feels like it upholds them to a very, very high standard and protects the quality of the degree.
Yeah, interesting. Now, I've heard some advocate that income level could be a substitute for race. And obviously it's not a race-conscious metric, but if you are from a lower income bracket, you might more likely be a minority, or it opens it up to other people who are from those kinds of backgrounds. Do you think that that's a plausible metric for people to use in admissions? Because after all, for scholarship aid, all schools are asking, what's your household income and your sources of income?
It's an interesting indicator, and maybe that's what I was sort of hinting at before, is that I think you could start looking at other indicators, because if you're trying to get diversity in your class, like there are some individuals who have incredible stories who might have previously ended up as part of the majority expectation, but really we're living similar experiences to dissimilar experiences to the individual who maybe grew up and went to Princeton and then went and then worked on Wall Street and didn't have any of those advantages. So I think it could be an interesting metric to look at times and could help with some diversity. But again, I note that there's some idealism in that, and that it's in the short term. I'm regret to say that I think that we're probably going to see the classes become less diverse in the short term. I'm curious to see how it works out.
Yeah, that's great. I think that essentially every admissions officer wants to craft an incredibly diverse class to have a rich and dynamic discussion with lots of different perspectives and opinions. That's not going to change, even though the Supreme Court decision in the short term is a negative.
Yeah, and I think what's actually quite interesting about it is that it's very hard to have conversations with admissions officers about it right now, because they are concerned about opening up a can of worms, and they are concerned about saying the wrong thing on the record.
Yes,
and then
that'll get him in trouble.
Getting in the wrath of like a whole bunch of lawsuits. If an admissions director were even to say, like, I've talked to a few admissions directors off the record about this, and they've said to me, like, this has to be off the record because we can't be quoted on this, because if we say just the wrong thing about how we're still very much focused on attracting diversity, and this ruling isn't going to stop us, we're going to find ways, whatever it might be, that they could find themselves in legal turmoil. And one admissions director told me that it was top down from the president of their institution, no discussing at all. Everything has to come from my office because we are concerned about opening up decades-long, litigation that's going to cost us millions of dollars, and settlements and all that type of stuff. So we don't even really know what's going on in the admissions office right now, because as much as even if they'd want to communicate those things to us, I'm going to challenge you to go out there and get an article written about this. I bet you're not going to get people who want to talk to you on the record. I think
we have had trouble with that already, in fact.
There you go.
Yes.
And so I think that we can't even be sure what's going on in the admissions office right now. And that's why, again, I think this is going to play out over many years to come. Like, I'm predicting a regime change in testing. I don't think someone could say, we have done this because of the affirmative action decision, because I think it would, in the decision, they warned against workarounds.
Right.
And that's why I think some of the schools were smarter to get ahead of these changes and start asking those questions years ago, because a lot of them are concerned about, if they change their process now, will it look like there are workarounds?
Ah, yes, of course.
Yeah.
So if you're a minority candidate, you shouldn't be discouraged. And you should make clear that if that's a key part of your experience in life, it should come through in your essays.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with that.
If a school is asking about how your family background, your walk through life has enabled you to contribute to a class, then that is your opportunity to talk intelligently and thoughtfully about your walk through life. That doesn't even necessarily have to be, directly my experience. You can talk about the immigrant experience. Let's say your parents immigrated from Cuba. That's giving you a perspective in life. If you're a first generation immigrant, you can talk about gender, you can talk about race. Over the 20 years that I've been doing this, I have seen that we have certainly moved beyond, a kind of tokenism in the MBA application pool. There are extremely strong applicants from all different walks of life, and it's not enough to just say, by the way, I identify in this way. You still have to talk thoughtfully about how it informs your walk through life and your ability to contribute to the classroom. But if you're doing that, I think there's, alas, because of the data you pointed to from UCLA, there's probably more room for you this year than you realize, because the schools are courting that diversity.
Jeremy, thank you.
Interesting chat. We'll see how this plays out. Thanks so much for having it with me, John.
Same here.